Do you think that if I have a plus two or plus three or even plus 5 points of material advantage, I am guaranteed to win a game? Well, you can't really be sure. You also need to see how the board looks like. And very often it happens that some player has a very high material advantage, but those pieces aren't really useful. Such as, the opponent's one rook might be down and the other rook might be playing on the center of the board. And your both the rooks could be in two corners of the board doing nothing. Um, so essentially, you do have a calculated material advantage, but in practicality, you don't because those pieces are not being useful. And if your opponent can really end the game without your rooks being out on the board, then you were actually at a loss of 10 points. So, this entire situation is what led to the rise of gambits in chess. In this video, we are going to learn about many such gambits. Gambits are essentially sacrifices that you make in order to gain more positional advantage, or in one sense of the word, more development in the beginning. Gambits are usually played in the middle game or in the opening. And gambits are a little different from traps. We have also made a video on traps, and traps essentially are situations which you deliberately create and you try to lure your opponent to fall into those traps. But when I say that this gambit, the Vienna gambit or the Queen's gambit, what you essentially mean is that you are deliberately losing material, but you are winning something against it. Yeah, that is true in traps as well. But in traps, you actually lure your opponent into making a blunder. But whenever an opponent captures a piece played in a gambit, it is not exactly a blunder. It might be a bad move. It might even be the perfect move to play for that part. But it is not a blunderous move. We are going to see a lot of gambits. I would try to ensure that we see gambits of different openings, not just of e4, e5, but there could be the French defense, there could be the Vienna gambit, and so on. So first, let's start with the wildest of them all, the King's Gambit. The King's Gambit starts with e4, e5, and then if you remember the Queen's Gambit, the Queen's Gambit is actually famous, and the Queen's Gambit starts with d4, d5, and then you play pawn to c4. And this is the Queen's Gambit. The essential part about it is that if White does decide to take on this pawn, then we really make the move e3, and then we try to capture on this pawn again, and we assume that we will have more central advantage, and the best move for black is actually to not to take this pawn, but it will be a little different when we play King's Gambit. King's Gambit, as symmetrically it goes to Queen's Gambit, is played by playing f4, and this already makes it a little dangerous. You can see the danger on the board, and this danger is something that you really need to prevent. So, for example, although the opponent will not really play queen to h5 check, queen to h4 check right at this move, because I can always play g3 and kick away this queen. But and g3 is possible to be played only because I had played f4 before. If in such situation, if there occurred a situation where this pawn does not exist, then the opponent might really give me a check and take on this rook as well, as we have seen in some wayward attack. But currently, if this is the situation, the opponent will likely take on this pawn because it's actually a free pawn. You are giving material advantage, and you now need to develop something. And the only piece that you should develop right now is actually this knight, because you do not want this check to come in. If you had made some other move, well, some other moves are also possible, but let's say that you move bishop to c4, then this check could be incoming, and in order to stop it, you would have to lose the right to castle. That is why, I mean, you would lose the right to castle, but then nothing more could really go wrong. The black cannot really attack me in this situation, but I generally do not want to lose the right to castle this early in game. So knight to f3 is in fact the better move here. When you're playing the King's Gambit, you do want to have an early developmental advantage, but you also want to have another advantage, and that occurs only after you castle a shot in the game. So after a certain point, when the actual, the developmental opening starts, then you really want to develop quickly as possible and then castle. So, for example, in such situations, if the opponent also decides to make such moves and you have finally gotten out of the board and now you really want some sort of play, then after certain openings have been done, you can finally castle on the short side of the board. And now you can see the real importance. The real importance is the open rook file. So eventually, when this attack starts, and maybe you can push c3 and then bring queen to b2, and then you can have a really powerful attack on one side of the board. But the king's gambit is actually risky as well. So after this thing has been done and you have played knight f3, the opponent also has a lot of options to play. And one of the most aggressive options is to play g5. If the opponent does decide to play g5, then you will be in a certain problem because after g5 you really anticipate a g4 coming in, and the moment you make some move like d4 and then g4 comes in, and then you really have to make your knight go away. So yeah, one option is throw knight to e5 and then really target this pawn back, in which scenario this queen will come on to h4, and you can see that your trouble is increasing, although there is not that amount of trouble. But if this happens and then if queen does decide to take on g4 now, because this knight is what was guarding on g4, and then you can have a queen trade and simplify the situation a little, because after knight takes and then you can take on this pawn, and you can see that the entire king side of the board is now open, at least for white. So white will be at a little disadvantage for playing the king's gambit. But in other scenarios, when this knight was really threatened, you could also ignore the knight completely. You could take on this pawn, and when the opponent takes, you can take back with the queen. And now, once this bishop comes here, this is a real threat. So see, although you lost a knight, you gained a pawn for it. So you are 2 points materially behind. And although you are 2 points materially behind, but you have developed a lot. You have developed the bishop, you have the complete control of the center, and in fact, you are also targeting the weakest pawn of the opponent with your queen. So your queen is also out, and in the immediate next move, your bishop will be out as well. Your castling has been opened up. Your file, the rook file, will be opened up immediately as you castle, and there is just one knight that is sitting there. So, although you are 2 points materially behind, but the engine still does not show very much disbalance between black and white. Yes, black is winning as per the engine, but the scenario are still balanced because of how developed you are. Another really interesting, very similar gambit is the Vienna gambit. So after e4, e5, the Vienna game begins, and if you play knight to c3, this is the official Vienna. The most common reply to it is a knight to f6, and after this, you can offer your king's pawn to the opponent, and this is the Vienna gambit. The entire point of Vienna gambit is not to develop your own pieces, but rather to undevelop the opponent's pieces. So the opponent will take it, I'll push my pawn forward, and this is where it gets interesting. Look at the opponent knight. Where can the opponent knight go? Nowhere. All the squares that this knight could go to, this one, this one, this one, this one, all of them are occupied, and the rest have its. There is his own pieces on the rest square, except g8. So the opponent will have to go back to g8, and that is how you have wasted opponent's two moves, and he hasn't really developed anything, and his doubled pawn is lying somewhere in the middle of the board, and in fact I'll push this forward and then take on this pawn as well. If he wants to defend it, then he'll have to waste even more moves, and I can develop even more in that time. So, well, in fact, when knight goes back to g8, you can also appreciate the difference between a gambit and a trap. If this knight did not have the g8 square to go back to, then this would be in a trap, more of a trap, because you essentially lured black to take on this pawn, and then you somehow trapped the piece, and this piece cannot go anywhere, and this piece will be captured. But in this scenario, when you are merely having more positional advantage than material, you will call it a gambit. Then we encounter another gambit, but this time from the black side. It's called the Stafford gambit. It also occurs with e4, e5, and if the opponent decides to play the king's knight, then you can actually play the king's knight and offer this pawn for free. If the opponent does decide to take it, we do not take this pawn back as we would have done in the mirror style, but rather we play knight to c6. And this is the Stafford gambit. And if the opponent does decide to take on my knight, and I'll take it back. And from here, there are a lot of traps in the situation. Let's discuss those traps one by one. Before going further with the gambit, I would like to emphasize on the fact that the engine shows me that white is winning significantly. And that is the thing with gambits. Gambits and I mean it's a gray scale between gambits and traps. So if you are trying to play one and if it doesn't work out well, well, you might be losing the game. So more solid game is always preferred at higher levels. But again, without game bits and traps and stuff like this, chess would get pretty boring. So this is where we begin with our first trap. If the opponent decides to play d3 in order to support his d4 pawn, because my knight is actually sitting there, so yeah, this is something that can happen. You can play bishop to c5, and it's very likely that the opponent might play, if he doesn't know what the Stafford gambit is, he might decide to pin this knight, because pinning this knight is actually useful. This knight is going to come here and then try to attack on this king's pawn, because this bishop is actually protecting the square from this queen. So in order to save himself from all of that, he might try to pin this knight. If he does so, then the entire game shifts. Now black is winning completely, because we will do knight takes e4. We ignore our queen completely. Even if the opponent decides to take on the queen, we don't really care because it's a mate in two. Check, he comes here and mate. This was one of the most beautiful traps in the Stafford game, but even if he decided not to take on my queen, there was nothing better to save himself by. It might have been queen comes to e2, and we would have captured his bishop. And the next best move for he can't really even capture my knight, because if he does so, then he'll be in a very bad situation. Queen goes here, this comes here, and you can take on this pawn, take on this, and queen is done. So you can see that this gambit is going really aggressive and really conceiving in a lot of places. If we go back a few steps and we see that, what if after this situation, this bishop didn't really come here and this knight came here? This pawn came to attack my knight. It still doesn't matter. We'll make the same move, knight to e4, and no matter what the opponent does, we are going to take on this pawn. And so, for example, let's say that the opponent does decide to maybe push this pawn itself, or let's see what the best move for black is. Well, best move for black is bishop to e3. So yeah, if he does decide to play bishop to e3, even then, we will just take on this bishop. He will take back, and we can now really attack from the h file. We can come here, check. I mean, defend, and then we'll take, and we'll have the rook. Even more different attacks where he does decide to take, no, does not decide to bring his bishop, but decides to take on my knight. Even in those scenarios, I can Firstly, give him this check. If he takes, then I can have the queen for free. But even if he does not take and tries to come on to this square, I'll just throw my light squared bishop, and there is nothing the king can do but give me his queen. This entire scenario can also be reiterated in a different form. That is when, yeah, if we started from this scenario and we came, this is what the opponent moved, and then we came in and then he moved d3. Even in this scenario, we can play bishop to c5 because exact same trap, sorry, the exact same trap will be existing. We have reached the same position, but from a different set of moves. Every single move of Stafford is actually something to win for black. So once this situation has occurred, if the opponent does decide to play e5 and we go on to e4 and the opponent makes d4 as his next move, even in these scenarios, you could actually play queen to h4 and really try to threaten him. If he does decide to play g3, then you can take on this pawn. If this takes, then this takes. But if pawn on f take tries to take me, then I'll just come here, give him a check, and have his rook for free. You could still go back and reiterate even more. So, for example, in this scenario, uh, if the opponent decides to play knight to c3, even in such scenarios, you could actually bring your bishop here, and if they try to do this, then your next best move will be knight to g4, because now we are really threatening the f2 pawn and the f7 pawn. They are so weak. We always try to threaten them, and the best move here may be to try to defend with the bishop, but it won't really matter because we'll take, and now we have a really good advantageous position. This bishop is now targeting both these squares, and we have prevented castling, and this bishop will in fact be saved. We'll bring it back to d4, and we have a really great position than white. Another very interesting position that could come from here is this one. Once you have played your bishop, if the opponent does not play d3 but rather plays bishop to c4, why would your opponent do so? Because he really sees that the problem was that castling could not occur. Because every time I went and attacked this square, so he really wants to enslave this square. That is why he places bishop here. Well, the best move, still knight to g4. We will still attack on this pawn. And if, like, no matter what your opponent tries to do, let's say he tries to castle, then you can really bring your queen to h4. And now you are attacking everywhere with, now there is a deadly attack on the opponent. What could the opponent do? If the opponent decides to play h3, even in that scenario, you can really take on this. We can take on f2 with our knight, and the best move, if queen does decide to come here, then you can really give him this check back. He can go on h2 or maybe go on h1. If he does decide to go on h1, give him this check again. If he comes here, it will be a checkmate in that scenario. In the other scenario, when the king decides to come h2 rather than h1, the game will go on for a little while. We can give him this discovery check again, and if he goes back on g1, then it's the same type of checkmate. But if he does decide to bring his queen in, then you have another thing. You can bring your bishop back and then give him this check. And yeah, he could try to defend it, but that's really not the case. Again, he could try to defend it with g3, but after g3, we will take the queen, and once the king goes back to g1, we'll give him a checkmate. If the king does go back to g1 currently, then we can take on this. Uh, he'll take it back, and you can now see the drill. Where will he go? He'll go here, here, and it will be a checkmate. Well, in this scenario, white also had a good option to play queen to f3, and queen to f3 might seem really harming in the initial scenario, because it is actually targeting my knight, giving me this mate threat, and also defending on this square where the entire danger was, because my queen was going to come here and after castling try to really attack. But all of these problems could be solved by a single move, knight to e5. And that makes it less dangerous of a move because it is targeting the queen, the bishop, and also defending this pawn. So the entire plan that queen to f3 came with is destroyed by knight to e5. In scenarios when bishop hasn't really come out fully onto the c4 square, but rather onto the e2 square, you could still plan such attacks by playing h5 so that eventually this knight can come to this square and then try to attack on this square. The opponent will defend it by playing h3, in response to which you could actually bring your queen in here. And if the opponent does decide to castle, then just bring your knight in here and you are in a really solid state, because now there is too much pressure onto this f2 pawn, and he can't really defend it. If he, let's say, tries to play this, then if he tries to take on the knight, then we can come here and after this exchange has happened, we can meet the opposition on the h2 square. But if he has left our knight then and there, then just take it with the knight. If rook takes, then take take it with the queen, and eventually the opponent will move back to the h1, and finally you could perhaps come to h6 and then try to mate it from here. But you can already see that you are at a really great advantage playing against this opposition. I swear this will be the last Stafford Gambit trap for this video. But if you play, if the opponent plays this and you bring your bishop out and they bring your bishop out as well, and you have a trade, then you can play knight to g4, and you can clearly see that this knight is not occupiable. The bishop is guarding it. So the max the queen can do is come till the f3 square. In which scenario as well, you could bring out your queen to g5 and then threaten on the e3 pawn together, which we can clearly see is weak. The only way of saving this queen pawn is actually the f pawn is actually to bring your king ahead. Uh, of course, queen to b4 exists, but after queen to b4, queen to f4, sorry, after queen to f4, this queen will go onto the b5 square and then try to threaten this. And in fact, if opponent does bring his king ahead as well, I could do the same thing, because once this happens, then it will be a blunder because I can take on both the rooks together. So this particular move, knight takes h2, is something that I found very shocking, as to how would I even think about it. But now when I see it, it's really about after I make a move, after the opponent makes a move, what will be the board like? And will the board be appreciated by me after my opponent has made the move? And this is a board I'll appreciate. I'll definitely appreciate to move my queen to e5 and have both his rooks. Let's go back to e4 e5 gambits. Today we are white and we have played d4. This is the center game, or what will eventually become as the Danish gambit. Once the opponent takes one pawn of mine, I do have the options of taking it back with the queen, maybe some sort of the reverse Scandinavian, or maybe bringing my knight out and really targeting on this pawn. But one option is also to offer him another pawn, and then the opposition does have a lot of options. One of them is to bring his queen here and try to take advantage of this pawn. But a greedy opponent will take on this pawn as well. In even now, the game is not really biased towards one direction. You can take this pawn back with knight to f3 and have faster development than the opposition in exchange of two pawns. But there might be another scenario where you just play bishop to c4. That is, you ignore everything about your own safety. You are just developing your pieces without seeing any consequences of the loss of your pieces. If he does decide to take again, you can take it back, and now you can see that you have a very strong attack in a particular direction. If the queen does decide to go here, then it can attack from here or maybe here. And if the opposition does decide to castle short, then there will be a lot of problem for him because I haven't lost two of my pawns extra just for nothing. I'll have that attack. And this was the Danish Gambit. Well, we could have Gambits in different openings as well. So now let's consider the Sicilian defense. In Sicilian defense, we again gambits are usually these pawn pushes offering free pawns, as we have seen in multiple of them, right? So one of them, which is called the wing gambit, is actually inviting this pawn to take over of my corner two pawns. And the idea behind doing that is actually to firstly to open up the rook file. Secondly, you want your pieces to be developed while the opponent is busy taking some unimportant pieces. And eventually, all I want is this big center. See, this bishop is here, this rook file is open, and now I can go along in the depths of it. So, if the opponent tries to move e6, then you know my next best move might be to, in fact, even take the bishop so that the opponent cannot really castle. Although, yes, I agree that we have discussed that if the opponent has an advantage, then do not trade off early in the game. But if the trade-off comes with the price of the opponent not being able to castle, I think that trade-off is worth it. So after this thing has been done, you can actually play d4 now and have this big center and this open flank side so that the opponent can never really have great attack here and have a defensive side here where the opponent will want to attack. Another variant of it could be, the delayed wing gambit. That is when you don't really offer the pawn in the first place, but rather you play a3 in hopes that you will in future play b4. The most common reply for black is to play knight to c6 in order to prevent this. But nevertheless, we play it, and this trade gets happened. The rook file is open now, so we feel slightly good about that. And eventually, we really push this pawn back, and finally, we want to also push the king's pawn and have this very big center. We will control it with a lot of pawns, and yeah, that is really advantageous for black, and I think worth a pawn. A very common line after this position that you will get is d5. And once you capture d5, it is pretty obvious that queen will recapture d5. But here, in this position comes a really great move that you might not even see if you are not aware about it. It's knight to e3. And why is knight to e3 so good? Because knight to e3 is almost impossible to stop. For example, you can see that it's going to create this particular fork here with the queen, the king, the rook, and the square. And in order to stop it, maybe you try moving a6, but a6 doesn't really care about it because originally our rook file is open. So if this pawn tries to take on this knight, I have your rook, and the queen cannot, of course, take on this knight because this bishop is sitting here. And so your only possibility is to just go back. And when you go back, when the opposition goes back, you can now push them to d5. And this knight has to just run somewhere. Maybe it tries to run onto the a5 square because it's guarded by the queen herself. And now you can actually, make different moves. Maybe play queen f3, and if the opposition does try to take, then you can actually punish him for taking on to this piece by taking it with the bishop. And now the opposition will be in real problem because no matter what he defends it with, I can actually take on it, and once he takes it back, and now this knight has one less defense, and we can in fact push the queen away as well. So yeah, no matter what the queen does, let's say the queen comes to b5, And now we can really torture it by playing c4 and like the entire point of the game is now to just play around with the queen. The queen will go back to e6, and then you could really pin this knight against the queen, and he can possibly do nothing but come to this square or come to this square, and now you can see that you are clearly winning this round. Brazilian defense also has another very famous gambit, which is called the Smith-Morra gambit. This one particularly lies when we offer the other pawn, that is the d pawn to the opponent. So in this scenario, if I offer the d4, this will be the Smith-Morra gambit, and the opponent can take on it, and we will offer another pawn that is on the c5. And from here, we can eventually take on this pawn with this knight and have this similar to the Danish Gambit looking scenario. The only difference is that this pawn is still here, whereas in Danish Gambit, this pawn was here. And that is where it creates the difference between sacrificing two pawns versus sacrificing a single pawn. Because now, if they sacrifice this, and we also allow this in similarity to the Danish Gambit, this move blocks out all your advantage. Now you can't really attack on the f7 square. This entire plan is flopped. This plan is flopped as well. And so you don't really want to give two pawns together, but rather just a single pawn would be fine. And then taking it with the knight would create an ideal situation for you to play the game. Into another opening. We could also learn something in the French defense. So the French defense really starts when you play e4 and the opposition plays e6 against it. You could offer him this gambit by making the move c4, and now you really expect your opponent to play d5. He could play c5, but then the entire gambit thing will not work out. And now you can take, he'll take back, and you can put your queen onto the b3. The idea is that if the opponent does really take it back, although you are losing materially, and the engine also says that you are losing quite a bit, you can place your bishop on c4. And now this battery is really powerful. It is defendable. I will not deny that. This battery is defendable. The game is defendable from the black side. In fact, black is winning currently. But at beginner levels, we will, as beginner player, we will have really a great problem in trying to defend onto our f7 square. Our f7 square is anyway really weak. And these moves, although queen to e7 is pretty intuitive, but the moves that will come later on might not be so intuitive for a beginner level player. Against the Caro-Kann defense only, there is another gambit which is called the hillbilly attack. The hillbilly attack happens with the bishop on to the c4 square. So what you essentially do is after you realize the opponent is playing the Caro-Kann defense, you place the bishop onto c4. If the opponent does bring it here, you just take it back. And after opponent takes on to and accepts my gambit, I bring my queen here, and now it's another scholar's mate style attack. And although black is still winning as per the engine, he will have a little trouble handling this entire situation. And that is what gambits are all about. Another is the Black Mar Gambit. It occurs when the opposition plays the Scandinavian defense, and you essentially reply with b4. And now the Black Mar Gambit really starts if the opponent takes on the e4 pawn. And you can also offer another pawn. And once the opponent takes it, you could maybe take it with the knight or take it with the queen. If you do decide to take it with the queen, the opposition will really have some trouble playing the game if he also takes another pawn with the queen. So now essentially the opposition is up two pawns, but black would have been better if he had not taken the pawn with the queen, because now a lot of problems occur. Although yes, they are solvable. Black like the engine shows that the best move would have been to take the pawn, but in the humanistic perspective, taking this pawn is actually bad because now I'm building a lot of attack. The queen, I'll try to push the queen back. The queen is now a liability in the starting of the game, and you always try to punish the opponent's liability. So once you have done this, the opposition might try to play c6, and then you can really try to throw the queen away. Queen can run anywhere, maybe onto the b4 square, and then you really have to defend this one as well. So yeah, in the Scandinavian defense also, you could have a Portuguese gambit. Well, that again occurs in the Scandinavian defense when the opponent comes in and you reply with knight to f6. One of the main, not exactly the main lines, but one of the lines of the Scandinavian defense. And you rely on the fact that the opponent might play c4 in order to defend on this pawn. If he does so, then you can offer him the pawn on c6, and once he takes it, then this entire scenario will be very similar to the Danish Gambit, but in the black sense. So Danish Gambit was offered by white pieces, but now you can see the exact same scenario in the black pieces. The two knights are out, one random pawn is out, which is not even defended, just defended by the bishop, and in fact, the bishop of the opponent is blocked by his own pawn. So this scenario is something that can occur, but the entire problem with this gambit is its reliance on the fact that the opposition will play c4, because most likely the opposition will play knight to f3 or maybe even d4. So that is why the Portuguese gambit is not really playable, but is something that you could always look up to. So this gambit might be really useful. It's in fact sort of a trap. So it goes along in the fried lever attack, where the game begins with e4, e5, and the next moves are the knights are out, and finally the opponent does bring his bishop out. So the right lever attack relies on this particular fact. The knight wants to come here and try to attack on my f7 pawn, but the queen is guarding this particular diagonal. And so, if the opponent does bring his other knight out and blocks this particular diagonal, then I can do the fried lever attack. So this is what it relies on. That if the opponent does try to do the fried lever attack, I'll simply bring my bishop out here. But now, this is called the Traxler counterattack. And what you essentially do is that you ignore the possibility of this particular fork, and you just bring your bishop out. In fact, even if the opponent takes on f7, I can come onto this square. Sorry, not on that square because the queen will take me. Take on this pawn, and or maybe not even take on this pawn. Directly take on f2, and then once king captures me, I can take the e4 pawn back, and in fact have the tempo by giving him this check. The best move for white here is to actually go back to g1. But if the opposition does go back anywhere else, then this queen is going to come out, and there will be very bad scenario. So, for example, if this king does come on to a3, then I can bring my queen to f6 and give him a check, and then really toy with him around because he'll take the knight, and then I'll come back to f4, yeah, queen to f4 check and stuff like that. But yeah, so if he does not go back to G1, then this the White King will be in a lot of problem. G1 and maybe in fact even E3 is fine, but F1 is definitely bad for him because the king staying on the F file will be really troublesome, and this entire gambit will work really good for you. Let's go back and try some gambits with the D4 option as well. So against d4, you do have the Queen's Gambit, and that is really famous. But if someone is playing the Dutch game, you could offer this pawn. and this is called the stand-to-win gambit. And there is a little trap here as well. It's this. You give check with the queen onto the h5, and if the opposition blocks it, you simply place your bishop onto the e2 square. Yeah, you just give up your queen because this king is trapped. If he does decide to take it, boom, it's a mate in one. Bishop takes h5, checkmate. And this can occur in the beginner level games because no one really considers that, oh, everyone will just feel that this is a hung queen and one should take advantage of the hung queen, but it is not the hung queen. It's your checkmate, bro. And then, of course, we could talk about the Queen's Gambit. The Queen's Gambit is not, some random line of an opening, but an opening itself. The Queen's Gambit starts with d4, d5, and c4. So this is the main line of the Queen's Gambit. From here, the game can go along in very different directions, but in the direction that it is most sought after, that is the Queen's Gambit accepted. When the opponent does accept the queen's gambit, the best move probably is to make the move e4. So now you are occupying the full center, two pawns on the two central squares, and the other two squares being controlled by the same two pawns. You are attacking on the pawn on c4, and you are really at a huge advantage. Um, in fact, the opposition might try to, defend this pawn, but you can keep attacking on this pawn, a4, and then the opposition might play c6. And so, yeah, the entire game will go around two things. Either they decline the gambit and they try to control the center, or they accept the gambit and then they try to hold on to that hold on to that material. After this situation occurs, you could, in fact, trade it, and now you are developing positionally even well because now you have opened your rook. And after this position, you can bring knight c3 and again try attacking to this pawn. The opponent will keep defending it, bishop to d7. And yeah, so Queen's Gambit accepted entirely goes along the lines of can I defend this material? Can I not defend? Once this traditional lines ends, you are in fact pushing it even further, and the opposition will try day night to just save this thing. But you could always, force them to trade, force them to weaken this pawn structure and gain more and more advantage. But the other line around the Queen's Gambit could be when the Queen's Gambit was not accepted. So in this scenario, there could be two things. One is playing c6, the other is playing e6. Playing c6 is called the slab defense, which is by engine the best reply against the Queen's Gambit. And playing e6 is the Queen's Gambit decline. This is another variation of it. To both these replies, we can play knight to c3 and continue on this game. But there has been no gambit now. Maybe maybe push e6, push e3, and then later c5 to build this chain of pawns, and then castle on the short side. You do want the opponent to castle on the long side in Queen's Gambit. It gets the game more aggressive. Um, After a discussion on the e4 gambits for black, we could come back to d4. So yeah, if the game starts with d4, you have the England gambit, and the England gambit goes by playing e5, and you really hope on them taking on to that pawn. After that, bring your knight out naturally in order to attack this, and most likely your opponent will bring out his knight in order to defend it. You could bring your queen to e2 now, queen to e7 rather. And if the opponent has the habit of playing the London system, he will play bishop to f4. And bishop to f4 might lead him into some sort of trouble. So now you're attacking three things at once, the bishop, the king, and this pawn. The ideal way of defending it might be to bring this bishop back. Till now things are fine, and you decide to take on this pawn. And even as a viewer, you could see that White really has a way of saving things. White could bring his bishop to c3 and save himself. Bishop to c3 is actually a horrible move in case of white. Because currently the opposition is winning, and in fact, there is just one single move that is the best move here, and every other move will lead to destruction for white. And this is why this gambit is really useful. I agree that white can, really damage me by playing knight to c3. And from here, I don't really have much better options. And I might be in a loss of, not materially, but the engine shows that white has an advantage of 1.5, which is a really good advantage. But more likely than not, in a beginning level game, the opposition might try to play bishop to c3. Why would they do so? Because yes, they do want to save their rook, but they also have this ick to kick my queen away. And this ick is what will lead them to destruction because now this move is horrible. Earlier, when knight had gone to c3, the engine shows that white has an advantage materially of something 1.5 or 1.6. But the moment the bishop comes here, Black has an advantage, not of 1.5, but more than double. It's showing 3.5 to 3.6 worth of material advantage. So this is why the game bit really works. And now this bishop, when it comes here, the entire problem is that this bishop, mine bishop, can really pin the opponent, and now he can't really take on this queen. And this rook is dying now, and there is nothing the opponent can do to save himself because he also has to save his bishop as well as his rook, and one of the two things will be dying in the next two moves. So let's say he goes back to bishop b2. I can take on the rook and have my even my bishop is not dying. This knight is there to protect it. So yeah, I have five. I have an entire rook on me, and this gambit will have worked out beautifully. One of the most beautiful gambits that could be played with the e4 e5 opening is the Scotch gambit. It is, I must warn you, it is a high risk, high reward gambit because, again, if you are playing at a decent level, you should not even try it out. But if you are, playing it for fun and you do really want to take that risk of your opponent maybe blundering something, then Scotch Gambit is a really good thing to try out because in this particular thing, if the opponent does not fall into it, unlike the Queen's Gambit, where if the opponent does not really accept my Gambit, even then we are fine. The game is almost equal. But in Scotch Gambit, if the opponent does play it out well and really plays the best 4 5 moves in the beginning, then you will be in deep trouble in the rest of the game. So the Scotch Gambit begins with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then you offer your d4 pawn. So this is the Scotch game, and the traditional line of Scotch game is when the opposition takes and you take it back, and if the opposition knight takes it, then you just bring your queen out, and it's some sort of the Scandinavian defense where the opposition's queen would be out, but currently your queen and your pawn is out. So yeah, this is the line of the Scotch game, but not of the Scotch gambit, because in Scotch gambit, once the opposition has taken it, you play knight to g5. This is where you really start losing the game according to the engine, because if they play, bishop e7 or something, then you are really losing battle. But if they don't, if they really make some other move, let's say they make the move h6. H6 is also, I think you might agree that h6 is a move you all would have made too. Because you don't like this knight here, you want this knight to be kicked off because you are somewhat scared of this particular mate. In this scenario, you make your game even worse and you say knight takes f7. Knight takes f7 is again another bad move for white. And the engine shows that white is losing by 2.5 points worth of material, but we don't really care. We are here to play, and we will. The opposition will obviously take on the knight. That goes without say. But now comes the main line behind it. You really want to play bishop to c4 check. And here is where the Scotch game bit will really tell you if it's going to work out or not. It totally depends on black if it's going to work out or not. Well, I want you to look at the board from the white side or from the black side and tell me what move would you have made. If you say that you would have brought your king back to e8, well, then the Scotch Gambit will have worked on you because it is not just going to gain some material advantage, but rather it's a mate in six. It's a forced mate, and you can do nothing about it. And that is the brilliance of it. So yeah, you lost a pawn, you lost a knight, but you did gain the ability to checkmate your opponent on his own blunders. And most likely he will blunder at a beginner level. So you can go queen h5 check now. And now you can see the entire trouble point. If the opponent does try to defend, you are just going to take it. You are on a rampage. If he comes back to e7, sure, you can give him this check and really push him away. His only move is b6. From here, you have three possible mating lines. One is, just going e5 check, then knight takes e5, then d5 check, and finally, when this king goes back, king to e7, you deliver queen e5 check. So this is one line which you could really go along. There is another same mate in three line, which you can follow, and that is bringing a bishop out. So bishop to f4 check. Just add another piece. Make him get more tensed if you just want to have fun. If he brings his knight here, then queen d5 check. He goes back here, uh, checkmate again. That is how you can actually end the entire game with this great blow in this Scotch game. A very powerful gambit from the black side is the Russo gambit. In the Russo gambit, you basically it starts with the e4, e5, and the general developmental rules, knight f3, knight c6, and after bishop comes to c4. Now, in the Italian game, now is when you decide to play the Russo gambit, and it might look very wild because you are opening up the king's pawn. But here's the thing, it has so many traps, so many places where white could fail that you really want to play this. I'm not even going to show you in the beginning what happens when white takes it, but what happens when white denies it. So, for example, let's say that white thinks that okay, the gambit is bad, one should not be greedy and take on a pawn, and that is why I'll simply defend it. Well, fine, try defending it, because the moment you decide to play this, I'll take on this pawn. You might think of taking back, but then you have this fork, and so you are losing horribly now. Even if you do not take it back, now you have to really do something of this knight. This knight cannot go anywhere. Not this square, not this square, not this square. Definitely cannot take on this square. So you essentially have to take this knight back as well. So yeah, this particular idea of defending it with the knight is bad. You might argue that okay, I might not defend, but you have really opened up your knight. So I will maybe take on this knight and take away your rights of castling. Sure, you can try to take away my rights of castling. But here's the thing. At this position, I the opposition made a move to develop a piece. Then he made another move to take one of my pieces. I never even moved my knight, so that knight was not even there. This is another good idea that I think you should think upon. That a piece that is developed has some value, but a piece that is sitting inside in one corner of the board. This particular rook has no value right now. You might say that yeah, it's worth 5 points, but it's worth 5 points if it is on an open file trying to attack on all four directions. Sitting on the a8 square, it is doing nothing. So sitting on the g8 square also, the knight was doing nothing, and he just traded the bishop for the knight, which is really advantageous for me. In fact, the opposition might also make the mistake now of taking off this free pawn. What do you think is the best move now? No, the best move is not pushing d5. Yeah, d5 is a good option because you are controlling the center and now you are going to take on this pawn. But moving e4 is also another brilliant idea because again, this knight is trapped. This knight can go nowhere, and it has to only go back to the G1 square. So after the knight goes back to G1 square, now you really have to think about one particular problem, and that particular problem is the f5 pawn. You have opened your king side, and you can see that this queen is, really planning its way in coming to attack. And it might even come to attack, but here's the thing, you don't worry about it. The entire issue is that I have so many pieces defending my king that one queen cannot do anything. So even if I move d4, d5, sorry, and queen does try to come here, even this will be bad for it because now I can just defend it with the pawn. My rook is guarding this pawn. If he decides to take it back, I'm not going to even take it back with the pawn and try to defend my pawn, but rather I'm going to take it back with the rook because it queen taking on to h7 will be even worse for white. I mean, it's difficult to see if you are not really calculating and are just playing the game based on on the frenzy of gobbling up pieces. In fact, we are down a pawn, so white might have the frenzy of gobbling up more pieces, but this does not really turn out well because now I can simply play queen to g5, and this battery is so powerful that it cannot really even be stopped. Even if you try stopping it, maybe playing g3, okay, fair. You stopped my attack on this square, but what about your own queen? The queen is dying because now h6 really forces the queen onto the only possible square left. The only possible square left is queen to c7, but again, the if that was the only possible square left, now the queen has even lesser squares because after I play bishop to d6, the queen has no possibility. But she just has to take this knight or take the bishop or whichever three material worth of piece she wants to, because every other square is simply blocked off the board. This square, if she comes to f7, I can take it with the king itself. So yeah, this was a nice little trap. And I mean, I don't know about you, but if I was playing with white pieces and I did not know the theory, I would have definitely, tried to give him a check with this queen. And once he had taken, I would have definitely taken back. This would have happened. I myself would have taken on the h7 pawn, and after this, my queen would have been trapped. So yeah, I think it is really deceptive. In fact, this was not even the gambit accepted. This was, really when the opposition had denied accepting my gambit by playing, by taking on this knight and trying to take away my rights, the castle. But let's see what happens if the opposition does decide to accept the gambit. Now, if pawn does decide to take on f5, now you have a lot of options to really consider. So first of all, you would want to play e4 again because you do want to push this knight away. Now, at this point, white has a really tricky move to make, and if he does decide to make it, which is knight to d4, you might be lured into a trap yourself. Because after white decides to play knight to d4, you might think that it's a free knight, but consider it again. When the queen was coming here, what was your best advantage? That your rook was on the g file and you could push g6. But now your rook is not on g5. So if you mistakenly take on this knight, then this queen will be coming here, and now you do have a lot of problems. So yeah, do not take on this knight, but rather your best move to make is actually play knight to f6. Just ignore this free knight given to you, and protect this queen to h5 check. And now white doesn't really have many options because this queen h5 check is blocked. The only option that they could consider is maybe taking on this knight, which is also fine for us. Now you could take on with both these pawns, but you really want to play d5 somewhere in future. So take it with the b pawn. That would be more ideal. And at this point, if the opposition decides to play some other move, let's say castling, then you can definitely play d5 now, and the bishop is now really on this entire diagonal. He can go nowhere, and most probably he will go back to b3. After this, you can actually develop your this bishop, really take on this pawn, and now you have a lot of attack options. After this, the bishop will come here and really try to attack on this pawn maybe. This queen can come out after this knight goes somewhere. But it depends on white, what white plays. If he decides to play d3, then you can actually bring your bishop to d6, not committing that much, but trying to attack on the h5, on the h2 square. And after he takes, you can take with the knight. Although, yes, you lost a little of the pawn structure, but now you have a really solid attack, trying to attack on many files at once. But after this, if the opposition does have a lot of moves, but if he tries to play rook to e1, then white will be in a lot of trouble because rook to e1, although it looks like a good move because you are trying to pin the knight against the king, and although the king does have the option of castling, so pinning the knight isn't really that great of an idea. But even now, at this position, you for black, he just has a spectacular move to sacrifice the bishop. You are just really opening up this line, and the moment king takes, you can just come inside with the queen, and if he goes here, take on this pawn. So the idea behind why rook e1 was bad is because the protection of the f2 square was only done by rook. The king is not really, I mean, the king needs protection. How will he protect on the f2 square? So the moment the rook moves away, I just really want to go all in. He comes here, I give him this check. He comes here, I give him this check again, and the king can escape back to h2, but now he's in a lot of trouble because now I can simply castle. I have removed this pin, so this knight is active again. I could keep on playing perpetual check, but why would I even want to do that? And this entire gambit has really turned out good for me because now I have this open F file with a rook on it. After this bishop really moves away, not exactly here, but yeah, I'll form a battery and I can have many multiple and dangerous ways of attacking white. So those were the game bits discussed today. I hope you liked the game bits and you do want to play some of them. I would urge you to play the Russo. This was one of the previous that I recorded. But if you want to watch more such content regarding chess, regarding lessons, and anything interesting about chess, do subscribe to the channel. And if you want to watch anything in particular, do drop us a comment and we'll definitely make a video on it. Thank you.